Welcome, welcome, Ashley. Welcome. So good to have you here. Again, welcome, Lizbeth. Welcome, Michaela. Welcome, Nicole and Khadijah. I said we're going to start a minute past the hour, and I want to be true to that because I want to spend 45 minutes just like going over some of the questions that I have. And then I'll spend another 15 minutes in questions and answers. But before I get into my presentation, I want to first and foremost say thank you to BUCSI for giving me the opportunity to speak to my peers. If many of you don't know, my name is Lindsay Syeh, and I serve as the BUCSI treasurer. I went to Barry in my master's program, and I am now a doctoral student. I graduated in 2021, and now I'm a doctoral student studying for my PhD. So I want to thank Nicole for her leadership and welcome on board unofficially, but officially, some of our newest leaders and hopefully some of our newest members that'll probably join on to BUCSI because we're doing amazing things. So I shared a little briefly about my me being a Barry student and a Barry graduate, and now I'm in a doctoral program. But I can give you just like a brief crash course to my journey into the counseling field. I started my journey back in 2018. I moved back to South Florida, and my first career is I'm a minister. So what that means is I work with a church, and I have served as a senior pastor, assistant pastor. I would just say this in a lot of capacities within ministry, like, the sky's the limit. It's not just, being a pastor, but the sky's the limit. And I recognized early within my ministry that I needed to get more tools to help support not only my members, but also support me for how to support some of their social and emotional needs. So in moving back to South Florida, I saw that Barry had a program, and I kind of was already on the fence about going into a program, but it was very convenient because Barry met in the evening, which meant I can do work during the day, and then I can come to school in the evening and just balance that out. So, I chose the mental health route. So initially I was going to do clinical mental health as well as marriage and family. But then I think in my first semester, I kind of nailed down and said, you know what? I already have a master's in one, and I'm a very ambitious person. If you know me, I'm very ambitious. So I had to kind of temper that and say, I'm not going to do that because I foresaw that I was going to go and continue my education. So my journey has been very interesting because, I always laugh with some of my peers. Out of my friend group, I was one of the first ones to graduate. One had a dual major. They had to take some time off because they were growing their family. And another, they were just going at their own pace. So it was kind of funny that I finished before everyone because I started with the fewer credits and I took a summer off. So I say all of that to say that, anything is possible, whether you taking the route where you're growing your family, you have to stop and pause school, or you are just going at your own pace, or you think that you're behind your peers. You never know, like you're going to finish and finish strong. So one of the things that, I appreciate about Barry is that they have these programs that address how do we transition from being a student into the professional realm. And that's a very important question because, sometimes when you're getting towards the end, there's a lot of work that you have to do. First and foremost, when you finish your coursework, you're going into now practicum and internship. And if you have 2 specializations, you're doing 2 internships. And then on top of that, you have to still sit for your comps exam before you graduate. So a lot of people conflate comps exam with their national licensure exam. So I put out a survey and a form. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask me, but to help me best serve you, I'm putting a form inside the chat so that I can get like, you know, some of those targeted questions that you may have. And you can also use the chat that we have. So I put out a survey, and within the survey, I wanted to kind of get a feeler out of like, what were some of the questions that some of our peers had about how to journey into from being a student now into this professional realm. So I separated this, I guess, this talk into two sections. So some things that you can begin to prepare for while you're a student at Berry, but then also how can you transition for life after Berry? So one of the questions that I have for life at Berry, and this is always a pressing question, someone said, how do we apply for licensure? So that's a very great question, because in the field, you'll notice that there's some people who they may just have maybe this designation after their name, MHC, which is mental health counselor. They'll have MFT, which is marriage and family therapist, or SC, which is a school counselor. And I mean, the designations can go on and on, but what, you know, the difference between an MFT and an MHC and an SC is, okay, what are people doing after school? Are they preparing for licensure? Because when you're preparing for licensure, in the eyes of the community, in the eyes of the client, and also in the eyes of just the field at large, it's showing that you are preparing yourself to sit before a national exam to get credentials. And credentials are very important within our field because it can separate, okay, one, it can separate pay scale, but two, just the kind of clients that you're able to see. So there's some clients that you may be seeing, but you have to see them under supervision. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But the question that was asked, which is a really great question, is how do we prepare for licensure? So I'm going to start off by sharing a link, and by the show of hands, I want to see how many students do we have here who are school counselors? How many of you are preparing for school counseling? Anyone school counseling? Okay. So just for the sake of like, you know, conversation, just in case someone is watching this and they're preparing for school counseling, I found a handy link from the University of South Florida, and I'm going to put that link within the chat box. So I'm going to dump you all with a lot of links tonight, right? But this link, it really gives a bird's eye view of that process for licensure. So we all know that in order to even start the process is that we have to graduate with our master's. That's the first step. And then the second step is that we have to go through internship. So no matter what your designation is, your concentration is, there is like a internship that you have to go through. And then for school counselors in particular, you have to pass the state certification exam for school counselors. And if you're not an educator, you're going to have to sit for the proficiency exam, a teacher certification, and the general knowledge test. So this is very vital for people to know that may say, oh, you know, after graduation, I feel like I want to serve at a school. And that's great, but you want to know what that entails before you begin to apply for some jobs. They want to see what your credentials are and what your process is for you going on to pursue being a school counselor. By the show of hands, how many people are wanting to pursue mental health counseling? All right, so there's a few hands. All right, appreciate you. So mental health counseling, just out of curiosity, are you all familiar with maybe the steps that you need to take in order to get that licensure? All right, so some yes and no. So here's the process, and this process can be followed for marriage and family therapy as well. So again, you have to have that bachelor's degree. And have you ever heard the term supervision? So as you all have been going through the program, think of this word supervisor. So in order to become a licensed therapist or a clinician or counselor, you have to become a registered intern and you have to sit under supervision in order for you to attain your license. So that process is like, and I'm going to put another website inside the chat box, and make sure you all bookmark these websites because they're going to be very handy for you when that time comes. So the process is graduation. And the reason why I say acquire a supervisor first is because before you can fill out the application to become a registered intern, they're going to ask and say, hey, do you have a qualified supervisor? And the reason why I say qualified supervisor is because what do you think a qualified supervisor is? If you're talking, you're
someone who's already licensed.
Someone who's already licensed, yes, but there's something else that makes them a qualified supervisor.
Maybe they went through training to supervise others.
Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, Valentina. Both good answers. Yes, they went and got extra credentials and they've been in the field for a little longer, or they just got extra credentials in order to become a qualified supervisor. So what you'll see is like after graduation, and there's another question in there that says, well, what kind of jobs can I get as a clinician? So I'm going to use the word clinician a lot just to be all encompassing of all the disciplines here. And some will say, well, what kind of jobs can I work as a clinician? There's so many jobs that you can work. So once you get employed, you'll notice that you'll have a supervisor. And just because you have a supervisor who is someone that oversees the work that you do, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a qualified supervisor for you to sit under, for them to sign off on your documentation for one supervision, as well as the hours that you saw them for supervision, as well as the hours that you got clinically, 1,500 hours for in-person contact with maybe a client. Does that make sense? All right, appreciate that. So, so you go to grad, you get a diploma from the master's program, you acquire a supervisor, then you apply to become a registered intern. And the website that I dropped inside the chat box is the process that you use to become a registered intern. And then you can obtain your hours. So the hours for marriage and family is 1,500 hours and 2 years. So you can get more than 1,500 hours, but you still have to wait the 2-year process. And the same is for marriage, mental health counseling as well. Go ahead, Michaela.
Can you do it simultaneously if you're pursuing a dual specialization, or do you have to do it one at a time?
That's a great question. Yes, you can. You can do it simultaneously. So breathe. A lot of you probably were holding your breath like, man, how am I going to make this work? Do I have to do 4 years? But some people do 4 years because they may not be privy to the information that you're getting today. And what I would say is, just as, you know, a pro tip is that when you're looking for your qualified supervisor, you may want to pick a qualified supervisor who's qualified in marriage and family, as well as mental health counseling. So, and have that discussion with them, because when you have that, when you fill out your application, on the application, you can do the application for both specializations at the same time, but you would still have to get the 1,500 hours for each discipline and sit for 2 years. But I believe that you can do it in conjunction, both of them together, but you would have to talk to your supervisor to talk that out. Go ahead, Michaela.
And But the hours cannot count towards both specializations. It has to be 1,500 that go just towards MFT, and then it has to be another. So, like for example, those hours cannot count towards both. If it was a supervisor, that would.
I hear what you're asking. So what I hear you saying is, if you
If some overlap, not all, but if I don't know, yeah.
So what I would say is this, on paper, it does say to get 2 years each for 1,500. And that's why I just say, talk to your supervisor, because they will be able to walk you and guide you through what that could look like. There's a process that they can talk through with you to see, okay, how can this be feasible for you to get the 1,500 hours, whether it's amongst the two or each of them. But, it's a great conversation to have with them. And trust me, it's doable. There are many people who are dual specialization and they're getting their license almost at the same time. So that's a really great question. There is another question someone asked, should I start my licensure process in the state I intend to live in, or am I able to begin working as a registered intern in Florida and then transfer those hours to the state I will eventually be moving to? So say, for example, Georgia, California, New York. So each state is different, and I would encourage those that are considering to move outside of state at some point. One of the hardest states to get licensed in is Florida. We take the NCMHCE exam, and that's a national exam. And this is specifically to mental health. And this could possibly be, going towards MFT as well. But just think of it this way. Every state, they are having different rules, terms that you have to abide by in order to get your licensure. And as I said, Florida is one of the hardest states to get licensed in. But once you get licensed in Florida, portability is almost as seamless to another state. So I would encourage, if you're really, really trying to move outside of Florida, at least register in the state of Florida as a registered intern, take the exam here in Florida, and then work out with your qualified supervisor what that would look like if you're moving to another state, and they can guide you through that process. Another question that I have is it true that we can do the licensure exam for Florida and national before we start internship hours? So I would say no. And I'll read that question again. Is it true that we can do the licensure exam for Florida and national before we start our internship hours? So, I mean, you can't do it before you do internship. You have to you can do it while you're taking internship, but before internship, you can't do it. And I would say this, there is going to be an email that goes around. I don't know if you all have seen it yet, from Mrs. Sharon. And it's going to be on behalf of Dr. Reyes. She is the coordinator for the National Board of Certified Counselors. And what that means is that as a student, you can begin to register for the national exam. And as you register for the national exam, you'll do this while you're in practicum and internship. So you may start the process in practicum, maybe in a fall time, and she only sends out the email in the fall and spring. And you may register in the fall time, and then NBCC will process the information and they'll prepare you to sit for the exam in the spring. And you can be in internship in the spring while you sit for that exam. And to learn more information, I'm going to put another link inside the box for you so that you can read up on it. This one is specifically to the mental health counselor students. I'm not aware of this being done for the marriage and family. And if I learn of anything, I'll be sure to pass the information along. But again, you can sit for the national exam while you are a student and while you're taking your internship, but you sign up as a practicum student or internship student, and the paperwork will be processed. And then, hopefully by that time, you'll be able to sit for it. The person who's the coordinator for our campus is Dr. Reyes. And if you don't know who Dr. Reyes is, she is the director presently of the Care Center. And the Care Center, they assist with exam prep. So if you would like to begin to at least know what exam you're going to take, the Care Center would be a great place to start to learn. The deadline to sign up for the fall exam is April 12th. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you did not get that email from Ms. Sharon, just send her an email, and her email I'll put in the box for you. I would say hop on it like tonight so that you can learn more about it. And then I will put Dr. Reyes's contact in the box as well so that you can begin the conversation and get guidance. But these are some good resources to have. And, you can sit for that exam while you're a student, which is such a great advantage where you don't have to stress out about it while you are, neck deep into the field. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to transition into, I kind of talked about a little bit about life after Berry, but those were some of the pressing questions that were being asked. Were there any questions about what I just said about the national exam? Did anyone have any questions?
Yeah, someone wrote in the chat, oh, well, it was Michaela, asking if the MBCC exam and the licensure exam is the same thing.
Okay, yes, thanks, Michaela, great question. So the national exam there's two national exams, I should say this, for mental health. That national exam is the NCE, and that's not what's required for, you can take it for the state of Florida, but what's required is the NCMHCE. And it's run through the MBCC. They're the ones who facilitate that. And it's the same thing that you need in order to become licensed.
So the exam we're signing up with Dr. Reyes, that exam is the same exam for licensure?
Yes, it is the same for licensure. Go ahead.
So you can sit for the licensure exam before having completed the 15 hours?
Yes, you can sit for that exam before having, as a student. So this is only something that you can do if you take advantage while you're a student presently. If you pass it by and say, oh, okay, I'm just going to wait till after I graduate, then you're going to have to kind of work that out after graduation to sit for the exam. But as a student, if you sit for the exam, the advantage is that if you pass it, the only thing you have to worry about is going to sit under supervision and to get your clinical hours. And then by the time you finish that, then you'll be fully licensed without the weight of that test being on your head. And I can attest to say that it's doable. I was a student who took advantage of it. I'm a registered intern presently, and I passed my exam the day after my graduation. And I'm just waiting now to get my license after I get my 2 years and my 1,500 hours. So I followed the steps that I heard, and I got the study material. I studied while I was a student. It was a lot, but it's to encourage someone out there that it is doable. So there was a question that was asked, and that was a great question, Michaela. And if you all want my attention, just use the hands feature. That'll help me to know like who to respond to in a quick fashion. There was a question that was asked, how do we keep track of our hours post-graduation? Is it through Tavera? How many hours do we need post-graduation? So Tavera is what we use for practicum and internship. I'm not sure if your qualified supervisor will use a platform like Tavera to track your hours, but typically every supervisor is different. Some use a different way of how they track hours and how they follow your time for the 2 years. So I would say it's not through Tavera, Tavera is just for your practicum and internship while you're a student. Only if your qualified supervisor chooses a platform like Tavera, then I would say, okay, then yes. But that's the only way that you would use that platform post Berry. And then they can refer back to those hours on Tavera to begin that licensure process. So you're still gonna have to use Tavera to verify your hours that you did in practicum and internship. So I would just make sure that, you know, you all keep a watchful eye on how you log your information in there so that it can be a seamless transition when it's time to just verify the hours that you use as you were practicum and internship students. And I mentioned earlier that you need at least 100 hours of supervision for the 2 years. And you also need 1,500 hours face-to-face and 1 hour of supervision every 2 weeks. So I see your hand, Lizbeth. Go right ahead. And then Valentina.
Actually, it was one of the questions was the one that you just answered. So 1,500 hours for direct, like face-to-face contact, and you said 100 hours of of one-on-one supervision with our supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the second question, for the licensure exam, do we have to take it as a student? Do we have to be in our internship semester, or can we do it during practicum?
So it just depends on how quickly they process the paperwork. Because I know for a fact, like you'll see it, like that's when you're eligible to sign up for it. So if they process it quickly within your practicum, you're favored, like you're fortunate. But what I've seen is that they took at least 3 to 4 weeks to process that information. And by that time, the semester was over and it rolled over into like the internship time. So
because I do my internship in the spring semester, so would I be able to take it in the spring, or is it only offered once a year?
when did you sign up for it?
I haven't signed up for it yet because I just wanted to make sure. My practicum I start in the fall, and then my internship is the following spring. So that's why.
I would say if you sign up for it now, it's going to be a whole summer. Chances are you may, don't quote me on it, you may be able to sit for it in the fall.
Okay.
But if you are, just make sure you're prepared and you're in a good headspace to sit for that exam. But yeah, that's a good way to just get it out the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Valentina.
Hi, just going back to the exams, I'm a little confused. So you said we can do the NBCC while we're students, but there's also the NCHCE exam, which is for the state of Florida. Do we have to do both to be licensed in the state?
Great question. So I'm going to clear up the confusion. The NBCC is just a licensing body. It's a National Board of Certified Counselors. They are the ones who administer the exam, the NCMHCE. So, you would just get that exam from the NCMHCE, where in order for you to be licensed in the state of Florida, it will come from the NBCC in order for you to take that exam. Does that make sense?
So the exam we're taking is the NCMHCE.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then the NBCC is just the body that the organization.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sometimes a lot of people conflate it.
Yeah.
It's fine. That's a great question. I conflated it. I was saying stuff and I was like, wait a second. So I totally get it. Go ahead, Michaela, then Ashley.
The NCMHCE exam is the licensing exam for MHC, but for MFT would be a second licensing exam, correct? It's two different exams.
It's two different exams. So I'm going to share information right now for how to prep people. You just may want to, you're curious. You're like, okay, so what is this exam all about? So I'll start this off by saying licensure exam is not the comps, and I'll say that because a lot of people think, well, and they text me, they say, hey, Lindsay, can I study for the comps in the same way that I study for the licensure exam? And those are two different exams, meaning the comps that you sit for Barry right before you graduate, it's everything that you have, like, it's the courses compiled in a test for Barry, just to show your proficiency on how well you know the material. But then for the licensure, it's like, sometimes you're gonna see stuff that you probably cover in a small way in school, but it's a different style of exam. And in fact, they're changing I don't know the format of the exam presently, but for the NCMHCE exam, they're changing the format. So these are some helpful tools that I've used, and you can either connect with the care center for them, or you can just like inquire about them on your own. And I'm gonna drop them in the chat box. So the MFT exam is totally different from the NCMHCE exam. I put the NCE exam in there because for some states, they do require the NCE exam. But to get into the technical details of it, like, you know, depending on if you've passed the if you've passed the NCMHCE and you're a national certified counselor, then there's some portability where you can bypass the NCE and still practice in that state that may require you to take the NCCE because you're an NCC, a national certified counselor. That's the credential you'll be given by the MBCC after you pass the NCMHCE. Go ahead, Michaela.
Does it make any sense, or do we have any use from obtaining CE credits during our master's? For example, if there's a course in a field that is not covered in our program that also grants CE credits, can we do anything with those credits, or are they just worthless for us?
I wouldn't say they're worthless credits. I would say that there's specific CEUs that we have to take as interns before we get licensed. To my knowledge, I believe it's like a substance abuse, HIV/AIDS, and ethics CEUs. So those are specific to licensure. And if you're doing CEUs while you're a student, maybe your interest is that you want to begin to maybe niche down and get a niche that you're interested in. And that's perfect because that can come out in a different way. Like, you know, whereas, you know, you're gaining more knowledge and understanding. So to answer your question, CEUs are always good, you know, but they're not going to count towards your license until you become licensed, if that makes sense. But I encourage, start CEUs, start exploring areas that you're interested in, start becoming familiar with the process of how to get a CEU, which ones would be acceptable for the licensing board, which one they'll say, hey, this is not something that we will accept, because then you don't want to run into an issue where you invest a lot of time and money into a CEU and then end up the licensing board doesn't accept them. And then, you know, then you're like, man, you know, I did all this money, I put all this money, I put all this effort, and they don't even accept it. So really good question, Michaela. Did I answer it? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
For sure, for sure. I have another question that someone asked, and someone asked, how is the exam? It's like any other exam. We know exams, if they were easy to walk through, everybody would be taking exams. But, you know, really test our knowledge on what we've learned. So what I would say about the NCMHCE, the counselingexam.com is by far one of the best resources that I've used for me studying for and prepping for that exam, because they give live simulations. and it's like the closest model that you'll see to the actual exam. And you'll definitely develop your own schedule, your own routine, but it's good to know your diagnoses. So if you've taken psychopathology, I would say know your diagnoses. I would say know your assessments, know what kind of assessments that you're going to be giving based upon the diagnosis. And one more tip that I will say now is know some theories, know CBT. I would say know different theories like Adler, know different theories like solution focus, but knowing theories, knowing your diagnosis, knowing what kind of treatment plan that you'll give someone for a short term or long term, it's useful because not only for the NCMHCE, but I talked to my peers. I had a friend call me today right before this, and I kid you not, she had me on the phone and she's like, Lindsay, how would you answer this question? So, she has me quizzing her and, she's quizzing me, but they're very heavy on the Mft exam with theory. And that website that I just showed you, it comes highly recommended from a lot of my peers, but theory. So I would say take at least 3 months out to start prepping, to start disciplining yourself. I needed more than that just because, I felt like I needed to learn a lot more because of the kind of exam that I was going to be taking. And it's the same exam, but I just felt like I needed more time. But, a lot of these exams are based on theory and you'll do fine. So if you're excelling now as a student, you're going to do exceptional on that licensure exam. Go ahead, Michaela.
Can you retake it, and how many times can you retake it in case it doesn't go well?
So for the NCMHCE exam, you're going to take it based upon the student cycle. So that cycle, they offer it twice a year, in the fall and in the spring. But if you take it outside of that, I believe the offerings are much often, as well as with the Mft exam. So they have you register and, they're going to give you that exam date. And I believe you can take it several times out the year. But with the Mft exam, they are going to wait 6 weeks, about 5 to 6 weeks before they give you your answers, your test scores. With the NCMHCE, you're going to get it on the spot. You're going to get it through Pearson VUE, and that's the test agency that gives us the test. That's who you take it with. They're proctoring it for us. And, I almost collapsed into place. I'm like, no way, I passed. So, so it's going to be a good time, just to get it in your hand. So be prepared to receive your answer on your scores for NCMHCE the day of, and Mft, you're going to get it some weeks after. Good question. Another question. So this part of my questions are geared towards job opportunities. So someone asked, how difficult is it finding a place to be a registered intern for? So I would say this, our line of work right now is in demand. So, that's the best thing about you all coming out of school, where you can honestly work at the same job or agency or wherever you choose to work. You can work there with one of your buddies. You two can apply at the same time, and you two can have the same job. So I know it's been said that when you have multiple disciplines, it creates much more of an advantage. It does. But, the beautiful thing about being an MHC is that we can take on clients that are families as well, that may present with some mental health, and vice versa. So the jobs are on demand, and whether you're working for the school, whether you are working for a private agency, a lot of people talk about private practice, the desire to be in private practice. What I would say is just talk with your supervisor. Your supervisor will definitely be they're the linchpin that gives the okay to that. Some supervisors, they give some leeway to some of their supervisees. It just depends, because at the end of the day, you're practicing under their license, and it could be a huge liability, doing that kind of work. So I would say that there are a lot of opportunities to do per diem work. So another question is, what is a typical salary for someone who is registered intern? And what can we expect the salary to increase to from when we are fully licensed? So that's another great question. So I would say this, I've seen per diem work as low as $30, some $25, but I've seen some per diem work, and per diem is like you just take on clients at an agency and you work on your own schedule. And I've seen it as high as $100 an hour. And that's like probably like you would have to find that out. And if you find it out, do me a favor, let me know. I want to get paid out just like you. But it just depends. I've seen as low as in the 30s, but I've seen as high as in the $100,000 for the salary. So you are the captain of your ship. You are the master of your sea, and how much work you put in that and how you develop your craft is how much you can probably do well. So I always cringe when I hear people say, oh, helping professionals, they don't get paid as much. And although we don't do this for the pay, there are different ways of how you can use your skills in order to earn a decent living. And if you want to talk offline about that, let me know. And I would be more than happy to talk shop and just to, kind of give some more guidance on how to make that happen. So someone said, what jobs can you do post-grad? So anything. You can work in a treatment center, school counselor, you can work for an agency. There's so many jobs that you can work. The sky's the limit. And last but not least, as we wrap up, I have about 2 more minutes. How frequently do we have to renew our license? So as a registered intern, they give us 5 years on that license. So that means we have up to 5 years to pass that exam and to cross over into being a fully licensed professional. And that's very gracious. They changed it, because I think once you were a registered intern, people were registered interns for a long time, but they just saw that there was a lot of ethical issues from what I've heard from people who had been in the field for a while, and they had to kind of change the standards and say, you know what, registered interns, 5 years. And, and once that 5-year time passes, I believe you have to start the process all over again. I believe so, if I'm not mistaken, but we're not going to do that because we know our process, we know our journey into the field, and we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. And, make sure we're abreast on our continued education. So, and that's also important to lead us into the licensure. But then as a licensed clinician, 2 years, every 2 years, I believe so, from what I read, is how often that we have to stay up on our license in order to maintain our license is when those CEUs do kick in. And remember what I said earlier, I'm going to put another direct link into the box. It's going to show like the approved continuing education. And how about this? I'll put these 2 links in for the for the licensure. And again, bookmark these, put them in your in a file, tuck it away until you need them. But those are some handy links to help guide you through your process. So at this time, I want to just end off by saying this. It's very imperative that, I say, and this is my humblest opinion, that we stay abreast about what's happening within our field. And how do we do that? We connect with the Florida Mental Health Professions.gov because there's a lot of policies, there's a lot of legislation that's out there that could potentially affect us or help us as clinicians. And if we're not up on our ethics, if we're not up on, what bills are being passed, what laws are being passed, we can endanger some of our clients, when it comes in terms of, maybe insurance, the kind of insurance, the kind of questions our clients are able to ask us about how much our sessions are going to be. And somebody may say, why are you asking me all that? Because it's their right to do that. But if you don't read the laws, if you don't read what's been passed by the legislators, then, you could be doing some harm to a client. So I would say, try to, go back there as often as you need to learn what's happening within the state of Florida. And then secondly, you want to know what's happening on a national level, not just Florida, but what's happening nationally that could affect us as clinicians, or help us as clinicians. So do that. ACA is our governing organization. If you're not a member, please join today or join when you can. But as a practicum and internship student, you're going to have to get your insurance through them or wherever you choose, but they offer a good rate through ACA so that, they'll be able to kind of keep us insured. Insurance is so important. Liability is real. So those are the two places that I would say. Obviously, you have the Florida Mental Health Counselors Association. You have it for MFT, you have it for school counselors. There's some things locally, divisionally that you can be a part of, but stay abreast, know what's happening so that we can be the best public servants to our community. So at this time, I want to know, are there any more questions that you all have that I didn't address? Any questions at this time, I'll entertain them.
I just wanted to follow up / clarify on the NBCC exam. I know that one is for the licensure in the state of Florida, but does that exam also allow you to practice in other states, or is that a separate exam?
So there are two exams for mental health counselors that you would have to take. And I'll preface it by saying, depending on which state you're practicing in.
Mm-hmm.
So for the state of Florida, it's the NCMHCE exam. The NBCC is just the governing body. It's an organization that brings together all of the National Board of Certified Counselors. That's the board that you can, when you pass your NCMHCE, is where you could become a nationally certified counselor. Meaning, that's just a national recognition, board certified, just as doctors, just as psychologists, just as any board certified clinician or professional. That's just the board that certifies us. And to answer your question, if you pass it, the NCMHCE, which is required for Florida, then there is a website, or on the NBCC's website, you can see the other states that require that NCMHCE. And what you would have to do to practice in that state, there's two things. There's this Portability Act. I wish I had it handy, where it gives licensed clinicians access to practice in other states. It's the compact. Let me look it up right quick. But it's a compact, which gives us portability. It's the counseling compact. So I'm going to put this in here, and it's good for you to know. A lot of people are in the dark. They don't know this. So, and this is really progressive for our state, where it's saying that as a Floridian, if there's a compact between Florida and Louisiana and Arkansas, that means that if they recognize our license, then we can practice in Arkansas and Louisiana. And that's very neat because, say, for example, we're doing telehealth. So telehealth is becoming a more common way of practice for many clinicians. And say, for example, you do that. You can still do in person. It depends on your preference, but that means that you can help someone in Arkansas and in Louisiana. And to go back to your question one more time, then there's another exam called the NCE. And that exam, again, going back to the NBCC, and if I have the link here, you can know which exam, and here, I'll put the link here in the box. which exam you'll need for which state you're going to be practicing in. But then when you want to practice in another state, you have to go to that state's licensing board and you have to figure out what credentials you need in order for you to practice in that state. So I would like to one day practice in California. In California, they have a very interesting way of licensing clinicians. Just out of my own research, I found that after you have your license, I believe 2 years after your license is when they'll accept you to practice within their actual state without going through the rigor. So you may have some states that you're considering. Go to their licensing board, see what exams they need, see what is able to be ported to that. And, and then have conversations with your supervisor who's able to give you even more guidance. Did that answer your question, Khadijah?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of acronyms that are thrown out today. I can't believe that I remembered NCMHCE. I used to butcher it, but obviously I've been around the block a couple times, so I had to remember it. But yeah, those are our exams, and the more and more you see it, you'll become familiar and you'll be saying it as smoothly as I. Any more questions out there?
Thank you so much for helping us learn more about how to have our journey into the field. I really appreciate
Absolutely. I'm gonna put my contact information in the box, and you can shoot me a text, you can shoot me an email, but I'm always an advocate for students. I always appreciate, and I'm a student myself, right? But I always appreciate sharing what I know to help people's processes run smoothly. I finished my master's last summer, but I was still in class with some of my classmates and my peers still call upon me. So, I always try to do my best to take some time out to help out. Khadijah, go ahead.
I realized when you said it initially and I forgot I had that question. We're talking about licensure, but I wanted to know what the process was like applying for the PhD program.
That's a great question. That's a really great question. So it's the same process that you would have done for your master's program. What you'll do is go to Berry or wherever you're choosing to go for your PhD. And what I had to do, I had to submit just a paper, one of the papers that I had done for class. So get one of your best papers. I had to make sure I went through and got the best paper, that I got the best marks on. You're going to get some recommendations. So I think it's at least 2 to 3 recommendations. You're also going to write a brief statement of why you're choosing to go to the school that you're going to, and then submitting a resume. So those are some of the requirements that you would have to, just check off on your sheet to become a candidate for a PhD to apply. But I would encourage you, if you are considering going on to continue your education, do it. It has so far been a rewarding experience for myself, because I know that one day that I get to come back in a role of a professor or whatever capacity that I can come back in, and just to really help raise up the next generation of clinicians in the field. And I would also say that if you return to Berry, then you get a good discount. There's a discount, and that makes sense. If you're someone who's trying to be conscious of maybe the debt that you're probably going to incur, or whatever, apply for scholarships. So keep all of that in mind as you consider that next journey. Go ahead. Is there any more questions? It was great to meet you too, Ashley. Thank you so much, Michaela. Thanks for your questions, Lizbeth and Valentina. I want to say your name right, Zarut. Yanexis.
Yeah, Yanexis.
I appreciate
Thank
that.
you for everything.
For sure. Bushra, I know you're just joining us, but we do have a recording of this experience. And our esteemed president of UCSI, Nicole, she will make it handy for you at, as soon as it's available. But if there are no more questions, you all make me look like I did a good job. And I'm not just saying that for my ego's sake. But I hope I was able to clear up some questions to kind of ease some of your burdens. I know it could be stressful just preparing for this step, but guess what? You're almost to the finish line and you're about to enter into the field and do amazing things. So I'm excited for the clinicians that you all are becoming. You are clinicians. You are clinicians, and welcome into the field, y'all. So until next time, my contact information is in the chat. I know, I'm sorry, Bushra, but here's my contact information, Bushra. If you have any questions beyond that video that you saw, hit me up, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. So yeah, someone wants to ask me a question before I leave. So I'm officially done. I know, in record time, right? I can't believe I am done. But see you all next time. And congratulations to any graduates that are out there and anyone going on into their practicum and internship. Y'all are gonna do amazing.
Thank you so much. You were super helpful, and I appreciate all your help. Super informative.
Appreciate it, Valentina. Appreciate it.